finally, but certainly not least, is Geordie Dent. So Geordie Dent is the executive director of FMTA and has been a tenant and tenant advocate in Toronto, Vancouver, Norway, and Indonesia. Wow. I also know about Geordie is he's a guy with great ideas, and he has this low-key but phenomenally effective ability to mobilize people to get things done. Now, when we were talking before this session, Geordie had said to me, you know, if we're running over, I can cut it short. But actually, Geordie, I would say, don't hang back. Right. Away you go. Thanks very much. You want to take this?
Yeah, thank you very much. So to start, thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it. I wanted just to take the temperature of the room a little bit. Who feels the housing crisis? Like who's, okay. I started asking this question about 5 years ago, and like the first time maybe about a quarter of the room went up. Last time I did this a couple years ago, I asked the following question. Which one of you either have gotten an eviction notice or know somebody that has so that the landlord could move in or rent eviction or something like that? Take a look around. That's not normal. That doesn't normally happen. I'm in my mid-30s, okay, late 30s. And I have the interesting distinction, this dawned on me the other day. I've now lived through 3 housing crises in Canada. I grew up in Port Coquitlam, home of Terry Fox and some nefarious individuals who went through a horrible leaky condo scandal in the early 90s. And in 2006, I was moved back to Vancouver from living somewhere elsewhere. And my God, you know, 1 bedroom was going for $700 a month. Egads, outrageous. So thankfully I moved to Toronto to escape that horrible situation and get out of that housing crisis where everything was going to be fine. And here we are today, deeply mired in a horrible housing crisis. So a couple things I wanted to do around this. Apologies, my tech is not as in-depth as everyone else's. What we're seeing today is something that all of you ought to understand. When I first started the Tenant Federation, we keep really detailed statistics from callers who call in. And if you look at kind of those early years that I started here in Toronto in the 2007s, maybe to 2011, the #1 issue, hands down, this went back a decade, was repairs. So people just can't get repairs done, landlords won't do them, they're kind of running the buildings into the ground. And then around 2012, something happened. For the first time, just the cost of rent became our most common issue. And then last year, evictions became the most common issue. So you kind of see this gradual kind of decay happening, right, where the buildings are getting worse, but at least the rents are okay. Rent starts skyrocketing, but even that's not enough. Even just the slow turnover is not enough. Then you get landlords just doing mass evictions. What this has kind of led to is a variety of different things in the city. So if you kind of work in our position, if you do any kind of frontline work, all you see is just misery, fear, constant harassment. You know, I experienced that myself. You know, I saw my landlord the other day talking to a group of people, and they were like exchanging folders, and I'm like, oh God, he's selling the building, I'm gonna get rent evicted. And everyone's kind of going through this right now. Everyone's kind of got a fear because a lot of people are locked into lower rents, and they know if they move out of their apartment, they're going to be facing a doubling or tripling of their rent in some instances. So you've got people kind of holding on to their apartment for dear life. The other thing that's happening is if you look at the demographics, the city's dying, and it's dying over the period of decades, but it's dying nonetheless. So what are we seeing? We're seeing rents exploding. We're seeing shelters exploding as well. More people coming in, they get evicted from their place, they got nowhere to go. We're seeing massive population declines. So census data came out and showed that, 0 to 10-year-olds and 30 to 4-year-olds have about a -5% population growth in the city. Those are families. Those are people that have their kids, and they're in their 30s, and they want to buy a house or rent a place. They can't do it anymore. They're fleeing the city. 20 years at that rate, we're going to have no families left. The other thing that's happening is the kind of nature and the character of the apartments in terms of just the businesses that we go to. They're dying too. There's 3 areas of the city that are facing massive rent escalation. those same areas of the city are facing mass kind of business closure. Why? Because the money that used to go to the bar and the corner store and the movie theater, that's not going there anymore. It's all going to dead money. It's all going to rent, where the landlord, as John Stuart Mill famously said, is just making money in their sleep. So how is this happening? This is one of the reasons, in my opinion. I think if you track the data, interesting things started to happen in 2008, which was that all that money that was frothy in the US housing market had to go somewhere. I think for about a year, I was reading a lot of the Financial Times at that stage. It was going to like commodity markets. But then after that, the housing prices in Vancouver, in Toronto, in Sweden, in Norway, in New Zealand, in Australia, all at the same time, all started increasing. And this is one of the variables. I don't know if anyone saw this yesterday, but the estimates from British Columbia, which also has a hot housing market, were that $5 to $7 billion was laundered in their economy last year through real estate and luxury cars. 2 to 5% of the entire economy. So, what's it looking like in Toronto? Oh, look at this. Criminals hiding billions. March 21st. Transparency International, I think, came out with a report saying over the last 10 years, $20 billion of real estate in Toronto is just laundered money. It's just money trying to find a place to go. And if you look at the census data, there's estimates 100,000 units are just sitting vacant in the city of Toronto right now. 100,000 units. So those are units that should be, built to be rented out or built to be lived in so you can buy, but they're not. There was something else. And that means you can't buy. It means you stay in the rental market. It means the person who's in the rental market can't, find a place. Everyone gets squeezed. You get that rent escalation that we're seeing. What else is happening? How is it happening? This is how it's happening. So landlords are just trying to push people out. They're trying to cash in. All right. This article is a bit of a disaster for me. I was talking to somebody on the phone on Friday, and I was like, look, you can fight a known use eviction. Here's how you do it. And they were like, I just read this article in the Globe and Mail. It says you shouldn't even bother trying. There was some guy named Geordie Dent from the Tenant Federation, and I was like, oh, man. It is rough, and it is difficult, and they are trying every trick in the book to get you out. But I did want to spend a little bit of time talking. I'm going to get to that in a second. So I've kind of explained the how that they're doing this. Why are they doing it? Why are they just trying to evict people out to make money? Well, the answer is pretty simple. They're just trying to make the money. But why isn't anyone stopping them? I differ a little bit from some other people in this regard because I actually think this is all on purpose. I actually think the regulators know this is happening. I actually think the regulators are facilitating this happening, and some of the stuff in BC is actually pointing to this. And the reason why is twofold. First of all, people are making a lot of money right now. All right, Stephen Gross, who's one of the owners of one of the largest developers in Toronto, Context Developments, also owns a company called Onyx Corporation that's headed by a guy named Nigel Wright. Anyone know who Nigel Wright is? Yeah, it's the guy who wrote the check to Mike Duffy, Harper's chief of staff. So Stephen, developer, had a direct byline probably to the Prime Minister in 2006 when a bunch of mortgage rules were changed that were really helping developers. In BC, you're seeing this, money laundering happening, en masse, and the regulator turning a blind eye. Sorry, turning away, not looking at that stuff very good. What else? You had the money laundering unit in British Columbia got federal funding of $0 in the last budget. No dedicated money for money laundering. Why would you allow that to happen? It's not just that people are making money, but the construction industry in Toronto, probably about 12% of the employment when you look at all the kind of ancillary industries. It's a house of cards. It's a party. A lot of people are making money. When the whole thing crashes, you're looking at massive unemployment. There'd be a lot of housing that's empty, but not a lot of jobs for people. So I think this is where, these are the kind of origins of this stuff. These are kind of the effects you're seeing. I want to end on a bit of a positive note. Alan had stated, let me start this again. Yeah. Who has a kind of a feeling of despair in the housing market today? Be honest. I see this all the time too. I don't actually have a lot of despair around these things. I mean, I know it's rough and I deal with the misery, but I don't have despair. One of the reasons I don't have despair is Erdise. Malou, hands up, where are you? So Erdise is one of the staff at the Federation, and she helps build tenant associations. And she's built a bunch around the city of Toronto, and that's great. Toronto Acorn, hands up. Look at all these folks in the back. They do backbreaking, difficult, rabble-rousing fighting for your rights and for improvement of rights for tenants. They do great work. There's great work being done by folks in Parkdale, folks in Scarborough on rooming houses. There's great work being done by folks with the Achilles Tenant Network in Toronto St. Paul's. There's folks all around the city that are fighting to try to stop this and trying to make it better. And that's the way organizing works. It's slow, it's persistent, it's painful, but we're going to win. Thanks.